Did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? Dogman. In my attic. Dear Scary Stories, NYC. Everyone knows about the Beast of Bray Road seen outside and around Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Well, only about 15 miles to the southwest is the town known as Darien, Wisconsin. And that's where we discovered the Darien Dogman, using our attic as a part-time pied-à-terre, or well, at least as a shelter. We just got back to our own home in Darien, Wisconsin in February after staying with my great aunt for about a year due to the pandemic. What we found had taken up residence in our attic was something that neither my wife nor I had ever believed even existed. Our house is on the side of town closest to Wildwood Park, and I believe we're the only house in our area that even has an attic in the first place. These are all one-story dwellings with basements, but our house predates almost all of the rest and has a completely different design. Not that it's the Taj Mahal or anything, but it's just a little bit bigger than the others in the neighborhood. When we first bought the place, I imagined our future children playing in that attic. It has windows up and down both sides of the slanting roof. I imagined that they could play as though they were in an airplane or a submarine. We still haven't had any kids though, almost 6 years later. Life keeps seeming to delay our dreams. COVID delayed everything because my great aunt Ida, who had raised me as her son after my parents passed on, had nobody to help her in her house as the pandemic was approaching quickly. My wife and I tried to budget out paying to have a nurse to live with her, but we could not afford that. We looked into hospice care as well, but then finally decided we'd go stay at her house for the length of the quarantine. We thought it was going to be 2 weeks or a month, so the decision didn't seem that grand at the time. Now it's 2021, and some other relatives are going to stay with Ida, so that my wife and I can try to pick up our lives where we left them off a year ago this time. Only when we got back to our own home, we found that we had a squatter up in our submarine of an attic. It started when we heard walking upstairs in the attic one night. Whoever it was, they were walking directly over our bedroom. My wife wanted me to go up to the attic and check on it, but it was the middle of the night and I was scared. So I told her it was just the pipes in the ceiling. I don't even know if there are pipes in our ceiling, but it was the first thing I could think of. When the walking sounds persisted, I asked my wife if we should call the police, but she wasn't thinking that it was a burglar. I asked her if we should call animal control, but she wasn't thinking it was an animal either. Finally, I just asked her directly, what do you think it is that's upstairs making sounds? And she told me that our house was haunted and that we had a ghost. I asked her why she wanted me to go up there then, and she said because that's the husband's job, and that launched a whole two-sided bicker fest. After a while, we realized we were making more noise than the so-called ghost, and we both went back to sleep, only to be awakened again, just maybe like a half hour or 40 minutes before dawn. There was a crashing sound up there, and we could no longer doubt that we had some kind of a genuine problem to deal with. Dutifully, as the husband, I went quietly and cautiously over to the double-bolted and triple-locked door to the attic. I had always been curious why it had as many locks as the front and back doors, in addition to the 2 sliding bolts. But I just chalked it up to the oddities of the previous owner. Now, looking at those locks sent a chill through me. Maybe they were there to protect the previous owner against... what? Could it be the same what that I could hear, even in that moment, skittering about above me in the attic? I only had one deadbolt locked, as I was not actually afraid of my storage coming downstairs to attack me, and I slid it open. Instantly, the walking sound ceased, and my heart got really loud in my ears. Have you ever felt like your entire body is begging you not to do something? My muscles ached as my arm reached to open the door to the attic. My eyes welled up uncontrollably with tears that made it harder to see. My body was rebelling against my will. It felt too strongly that we were walking toward our doom. It was such an overwhelming feeling that I stood there hyperventilating for a moment, unable to move forward. But then I told myself that I was just being emotional because of my wife's ghost stories, and I had no real reason to be afraid. Taking a deep breath and opening the door, I saw nothing in front of me other than the staircase leading up. Before a sense of relief could sink in, though, I caught a waft of the stuffy, closed-in attic smell that I was used to. But mixed in with it was a very strong and thick odor that could only have been made by an animal. I mean a large animal such as a bear or a moose. Neither bear nor moose are known to climb into people's attics though, so I figured we might have a family of raccoons up there. I was far too chicken to try to confront a family of wild animals armed with my flashlight and nothing else. So I decided it would be wiser for me to be cautious and retreat. I should call out the animal control people, and they could figure out what had moved in. But before I could step backward and close the door up, around the corner of the top of the stairs came our squatter in the flesh and in the fur. It was a dog freak, neither man nor dog. I screamed at this nasty Deliverance-style creep. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I mean, in the harsh flashlight, it looked like this thing had silver fur, covering a very pale skin tone that was not any of the colors that human beings can be. It was sort of a sickly bluish gray over a largely humanoid body, but this utter freak had the head of a straight-up dog. I don't mean it had a dog-like face, or that this man had a snout like a dog. I mean, there was a very normal kind of dog head on top of this very abnormal body. It wasn't just terrifying to see, it was nauseating as well, at least to me. It was some kind of sick abomination that wasn't meant to be. I slammed the door immediately and the creature flew madly and insanely into it, trying to force it open and get at me. I locked each lock in succession, and even as I backed away, the dog-headed freak would not stop banging on the door and trying to get through it. I called animal control, but passed out mid-call. My wife finished the call for me, even though she had not seen anything and wasn't sure what I was even talking about. After the sun came up, the animal control people answered our message and said they were sending 2 men over. I suggested they bring an army with them, and it still might not be enough. I was pretty shaken up, so I left a note for the men as to where the key was and took us out for pancakes at a diner. I needed comfort food in that moment. When we got back, the animal control people were already packing up to go. They told us that whatever had gotten into our attic had gotten back out again, too. One of the windows had been forced open and broken to enlarge it. That had to be how it got in and how it exited as well. We asked them if they could tell us what kind of animal it was, and they gave us an evasive answer. They had these expressions on their faces that I could not decipher. I don't know if they were suspicious of me, or if they knew something that they weren't telling us. But they gave me the strangest glances, and they were making me feel paranoid instead of making me feel better about things. We had men out that same day to fix and reinforce the broken opening, and we spent hours cleaning the attic up. After a few days, one of my relatives had heard about our story and contacted me to ask if we had preserved any of the fur that was in the attic. He was saying that he had a connection at a DNA testing lab, and we might be able to formally discover the Dogman in a scientific sense. To tell you the truth, we were just trying to get the stink out of the room up there. We were not thinking about DNA or getting involved in any kind of fight to prove that this creature exists or doesn't. I don't even know what kind of a thing that was, or if it was a mix of different things. I'm not sure I would want to find out how that abomination came into existence. I'm focused on reinforcing security around the house now because I never want a replay of the time that I found a Dogman in my attic. Don't go anywhere. We've got another Dogman story in a minute. But first, we'd like to thank today's executive producer, Gwyn Humphreys and Allison. Gwyn and Allison. One can find no malice in. UK's native Gwyn Humphreys. Look out, folks, I need to sneeze. Oh, sorry about that. Hope you're at least 6 feet back from the screen. What's going on here? Henry? Oh, Bigfoot, it's me, Henry Lee Dogman. I can see that, Henry. You're just the guy I want to talk to because I think I got something for you that can make your life easier. Is it cyanide? Oh, wow, dude, no. Dude, you really do need a vacation. You're taking things way too serially. Cereal? I can't afford cereal. Well, now at least I found a way for you to take a few days off. How's that? I got this software for my laptop, see? And it, writes stories for you. So this way you can go chill in a forest for a few days and I'll have the computer write the episodes for you until you're back to normal. Well, thank you, Henry. This is very nice of you. It sounds too good to be true, though. Can you give us an example of what the software can do? See, I'm way ahead of you, buddy. Oh, don't call me buddy. I input just 2 words, see? The Dogman here into the software. And then it spat out this sample scary story all on its own by itself alone. Okay, Henry, read it to us. Smokey, can you put the doc file up on the prompter? Yeah, that's it. Great, thanks. Anubis and the Dogman by Henry's computer. The Dogman might not have seen him as a friend, but he had helped him, had done so without expectations or demands, had quietly aided in a way that Jack had greatly appreciated. But now, Jack was being asked to help out yet another friend whose life was about to implode. It might be true that his friend, my parents, were going to die, and that was not okay. One thing was certain. The next man who walked through the door would never be an animal or an artificial construct. These 2 dogs were not dogmen at all by that description. What on earth was going on? Well, it appeared that the predator had killed a mouse and carried it away and had now turned his attention to Jim and his friends. Jim's mother and father were walking behind him when they were attacked. The Dogman came from behind and jumped on Jim's mother, who cried out in pain. His father tried to shoot the animal but was unsuccessful. They were quite afraid and ran to Jim's grandmother, who lived at the other end of the lane. She prayed to Anubis, who was locked in a cage in the corner. And then we went home. The enforcer showed up to take the pendant, and Joe went at him with a knife. Joe got the knife stuck in his hand before he was subdued, and Anubis blessed Joe with divine strength. We got back to Mike's, and Dave went straight for the cigar box. It was an ugly, cheap thing made of leather and wood, just like Joe said. He opened it, and there were the ribs. They still didn't look like meat. Mike went to see his mom. The end. What? The end? How is that the end? Why are there so many characters introduced and then not mentioned again? Well, sometimes things work out sort of sloppy when you're telling true stories. What? That was a true story? It didn't even make any sense, Henry. And how often do we all say that about life? I'm getting a headache. Now I need a vacation from your vacation. Look, it's long past time for our second scary Dogman story. And we call this one Dogman Had Puppies in Our West Wing. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my parents weren't rich, but we ended up living in a huge mansion during my childhood. The house was so expansive that we didn't even realize at first that Dogman had puppies in our west wing. The best thing that ever happened to me as a kid was when my parents went broke. It caused Mom's rich relations to pity us and take us all in to live in their haunted mansion. My parents were made to do menial labor to earn their keep and treated like failures. but I was treated as a real member of the family and told from an early date that I was in line to become an heir if I played my cards right. Playing my cards right meant siding with my eccentric relatives over my parents 100% of the time. Even my mother told me to go along with whatever they suggested. She and my father were sacrificing their lives and humiliating themselves so that I could have a better life. If I were to remain loyal to them over our strange benefactors, I would make their sacrifices pointless. To honor them, I would have to betray them. Living with a family that has been rich for more than one generation can be a tricky and frequently daunting endeavor. The kinds of behaviors that become acceptable and even normal to people like them would repulse most of you, some of them morally, others physically. My father tried to work in show business. He showed his ideas to the wrong people and they stole them. After that, his career and reputation were crushed. Even though $1 billion were made off his ideas, he was never allowed to work again. He taught me from a young age that you can't make it in any field without having to do things that you know are wrong. If I said no to my weirdo family's oddball requests of me, I would just have to go out in the real world and get hazed by a group of strangers instead. Nobody gets anything without giving something up, and both my parents urged me to do whatever was needed to get my share of the family inheritance. Then maybe my own children would be able to live as decent human beings because of my sacrifice for them. And so my parents and I lived in this huge Dark Shadows mansion that literally had 2 wings shut off, in spite of the fact that the 3 of us together weren't worth a dime in the world. And the mansion was so incredibly large that we actually had a breeding population of dogmen, utilizing a suite of rooms near the forest to rear their pups in. There is a tower at the northeast end of the mansion built like a castle turret. My mother was cleaning and dusting in the rooms in the tower and rested when she got to the top. The windows from up there afford grand views, and my mother relaxed and smoked a cigarette in a window that had a view of the closed-down west wing over near the overgrown forest land. She saw something from that window that caused her to call a secret family meeting that night for us to strategize privately about. What my mother told me and my father that she saw was a large dogman exiting the building and re-entering through an entrance to the basement that she did not have a direct view of. Dad and I quizzed her about what she might be calling a dogman. She just kept saying it was a dogman, so Dad and I snuck around that end of the estate looking for any possible entrances into the building located on the ground floor or near the base. We found it quickly and had no doubt that this was the entrance. A window to the basement large enough for a man to slip through was left wide open. We both dropped to our knees and peered inside, but it was too dark to see anything. Dad shone his flashlight around, and we saw something that totally blew both of our minds. In that basement, squinting back at us in the harsh illumination of the high-powered flashlight, was a large, gray, wolf-like mother dog, and she was nursing a bunch of pups, all colored various shades of gray like their mom. I was literally about to say, "Aww," when that mother wolf stood up. I mean, she stood up on her hind legs, and the puppies were tossed here and there as she did so. The look on her face had turned to one of pure rage, and she charged toward the window as Dad and I screamed and ran away. I was terrified and paranoid the entire way back. I thought she was going to climb out of that window and run after us. Or even worse, that her larger male mate might chase us down. That's what my mother must have seen. The male venturing out to get food or other necessities to the mother and her pups. When we regrouped with Mom, both Dad and I were shaking all over from the experience. None of that was something that we could have predicted, and the amount of novelty in our lives had gone on to overload. Nevertheless, Dad was trying to be rational And he said we should call animal control at once. Mom, on the other hand, disagreed. Once she learned that there was a mother in that basement who had just delivered her pups, she advised Dad to wait a day or two before calling animal control. He did as she suggested, and by the time the men arrived, the Dogman family had cleared out. That's what Mom wanted to give them time to do. She figured that once they knew they'd been discovered, they would pack up and clear out at the first possible chance. Just the smell of me and Dad at the window should be enough to cue the male Dogman in as to what happened while he was out. I asked Mom how she could predict the behavior of a Dogman. She told me she couldn't, but she could predict the behavior of a mother. And so that's the story of how, when I was a kid, Dogman had puppies in our West Wing.
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. You have a scary experience you want to tell us about? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.